Maritime hominin dispersal in the Pleistocene, advancing the debate. Ocean as inhibitors or enablers of dispersal? To what extent is the spatial and temporal patterning in the spread of our genus around the planet, and what environmental and behavioral factors specify this patterning? The prevailing model of Pleistocene dispersals of Homo holds that this process was essentially terrestrial, with ocean and seas inhibiting the directing the movement of hominins south of Africa. Although some scholars propose short-range maritime hopes at both the Strait of Gibraltar and Bab el-Mandeb, the relatively recent discovery of stone tools with apparently lower and middle Paleolithic characteristic on islands in the eastern Mediterranean and in island Southeast Asia or ISEA has, however, been used by some scholars to challenge this terrestrial model. The most extensive, if still contentious, data come from Flores in the Lesser Sundas, where sites in the Soas Basin provide the earliest dates for hominin presence of the island. The chipped stone assemblage from Wolosage dates to 1.2 Mia, while a mandible fragment and isolated teeth from Meta Menye assigned to H. florensis on a morphological basis and found in association with non-hominin taxa, as well as chipped stone artifacts are dated to 0.7 Mia, much earlier than the controversial, if now redated fossil evidence provided by specimen LB1. Examples of islands devoid of fossil data, yet with purported pre-Uber Paleolithic artifacts, include Sulawesi to the north of the Lesser Sundas across the Flores Sea, and a number of Mediterranean islands, most notably the Greek island of Crete, Gevdos, Naxos, and potentially Melos and Kefalonia. The stone tools reported from the Greek island have lower and middle Paleolithic morphotypological characteristics, and some have associated radiometric dates that suggest that they are late Middle Pleistocene in age, if not earlier. These islands have probably remained insular throughout glacially driven quaternary sea level oscillation, and thus this data have been interpreted as indicative of a hitherto unexpected capacity among archaic hominins for international maritime dispersal as early as the mid-lower Paleolithic. If this revisionist maritime model is supported by future research, it could radically destabilize our current understanding of the structure of hominin dispersal. Other scholars, however, have hesitated to accept either the Paleolithic credential of the lithic artifacts or the likelihood of international maritime dispersal potentially implied by them. We ourselves have disagreed substantively on this issue, yet despite one of us being a major proponent of the revisionist maritime model, and the other a serial critic of it, we find that we are nevertheless in full agreement on two major issues connected with the debate. First, this topic is of profound importance for the archaeology of hominin dispersal, with broader implication for cognitive evolution in Homo. If we have fundamentally misunderstood environmental constraint on and the spatial structure of hominin dispersal, then serious aspersion would be cast both on models of tempo and gradient of the evolution of behavioral plasticity and on our ability to recognize the present versus absence of Paleolithic occupation, or necessitate providing a revised account of why many islands do seem to lack such occupation. Second, as a function of this recognition, we agree that the utmost clarity of expression, of definition of the problem at hand, and of articulation of question-led research, the absence of which can only further clothe and already murky waters need to be brought to a well-defined body of data. This is the goal of our present contribution, to frame how we perceive the problem in terms that are as precise as possible, and based on this, to outline how we may better bring theory, method, and data to bear on this issue so that we might move toward understanding whether archaeologists have accurately grasped or not the broad outline of how and in what terms hominins spread around the planet. Clarifying the debate, we suggest that a number of trends can be identified that have prevented this debate from moving forward, not least different terminologies being employed for different ends, and rules regarding definition of voyaging and seafaring. We do not dwell here on the spectrum of eco-dynamic and behavioral process implied by the commonly used term colonization, which has a wide range of possible definition, mostly referring to permanent, year-round settlement, and which is most appropriate for the activities of modern human in the Holocene. For human dispersal in the Pleistocene, very different terms from colonization may be apt, and it is sufficient to note that detailed specificity regarding the type and degree of activity under discussion can only improve clarity, especially when underdetermined phraseologies have very different meaning for scholars working at opposite ends of the Pleistocene and into the Holocene. We also note that the tacit reliance on varying standard of evidence when evaluating claims for early island occupation, as well as differences between implicitly deductive and inductive approaches to the material, has also clouded the picture. Do we require deeply satisfied sites with shoot of absolute dates, or are morphotypologically Paleolithic surface assemblage adequate? We disagree on the answer and explore the issue in greater detail, but we agree completely that it is necessary to be explicit about which position is being endorsed and the degree of skepticism with which the data set is being approached. A more substantial obstacle to progress in this discussion is the potential to conflate three interrelated but discrete research problems. The first problem involves the possibility of maritime dispersal by archaic species of Homo, particularly H. erectus sensu lato and heidelbergensis, as well as Neanderthalensis and anatomical modern form around 300 until 200 Kia during the Lower and Middle Paleolithic. The second problem relates to the extent and form of seagoing and colonizing behavior among behavioral modern practicing hunting, gathering, fishing following their arrival in ISEA and the circum-Mediterranean, and yet prior to the advent of agro-pastoral lifestyle. A third and final problem involves patterning in early mid-Holocene seagoing and colonizing behavior by behavioral modern practicing various forms of agro-pastoralism. We argue that the explicit recognition of these research problems is essential if we are to escape conflation of these individual issues and the term in which they are defined. The substantial behavioral, cognitive, and social differences between, for example, Lower and Upper Paleolithic contexts suggest that the apparent patterning might derive from very different structuring factors. Despite accumulating evidence for sporadic activity, the general reluctance of the part of behavioral modern is the aftermath of the last glacial maximum or LGM to exploit island environment is potentially a function of the general unattractiveness of island to hunter-gatherer fisher population, perhaps relating to the intrinsic trophic limitation of comparatively small habitat fragments. That is, we might understand this apparent lack of interest in small island to be a function of insular energetic limitation relating to viable range and group size rather than an outcome of strictly biogeographic barriers to dispersal. Terminal Upper Paleolithic communities were, after all, demonstrably capable of reaching Mediterranean islands. Thank you.